For nearly 50 years, J. Edgar Hoover held immense power, becoming the hidden force behind American law enforcement. He didn't just lead the FBI, he turned it into a powerful tool of surveillance and control. Hoover collected secret files on presidents, politicians, and celebrities, using their private lives as leverage to keep his authority unchallenged. With dirt on the country's most powerful people, he became one of the most feared men in America, answering to no one and operating without limits. Under his rule, the FBI wasn't just a government agency, it was a machine of intimidation and influence, shaping the country through fear and quiet threats. Leading the FBI from 1924 to 1972, Hoover built up an incredible level of power, turning the Bureau into a major force in law enforcement and a quiet player in national politics. His legacy is a mix of clever strategy, controversial tactics, and a level of control so high that few people dared to question him. Even powerful presidents like Kennedy and Eisenhower didn't dare to challenge him. Hoover didn't just enforce the law, he used it to his own advantage, positioning himself as an unseen controller who influenced politicians and shaped policies in ways that are still discussed and debated today. Born in 1895 in Washington, D.C., Hoover's rise to power was driven by intense ambition and a strong belief in his idea of American values. He joined the Department of Justice during World War I and worked his way up to the Bureau of Investigation, which would later be known as the FBI. His career took off during the Red Scare of the 1920s, when Americans feared communism and anarchism. Hoover's careful record-keeping and strong organizational skills made him invaluable to his bosses. He created the Radical Division to investigate suspected radicals, cementing his reputation as someone willing to go to any lengths to protect national security, even if it meant stepping on civil rights. In 1924, at just 29 years old, Hoover was made director of the Bureau of Investigation. He took over an organization plagued by corruption, quickly reshaping it with strict rules and a focus on efficiency. Under his leadership, the FBI became known for its order and precision, but it also became a powerful tool for surveillance and control. These early years under Hoover set the foundation for a highly centralized organization with little oversight. One of Hoover's key strategies was building up the FBI's public image. Through newsreels, newspapers, and even Hollywood movies, he helped create the myth of the heroic G-Man, a fearless federal agent standing between America and its enemies. This positive image not only made the FBI popular, but also made Hoover himself seem untouchable. By presenting the FBI as a flawless organization, Hoover discouraged anyone from questioning his actions or digging deeper into the agency's activities. This carefully crafted image was just one part of Hoover's larger plan to build and keep his influence. By portraying the FBI as a stronghold against crime and threats to the nation, he gained the trust of presidents, congressmen, and the general public. At the same time, he collected large amounts of information on people who might challenge him. From Hollywood stars like Charlie Chaplin, Marilyn Monroe, and Frank Sinatra to influential political figures like John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and Eleanor Roosevelt, Hoover amassed secret files on personal lives and relationships. This tactic helped him stay in power and even allowed him to intimidate presidents, creating a hidden network of control that made him one of the most powerful figures in America. One of Hoover's primary missions was to combat what he perceived as the threat of communism. Throughout his career, he saw communists as a serious threat to American society and devoted enormous resources to rooting them out. The Red Scare of the 1950s provided Hoover with the perfect climate to intensify this mission. He established surveillance operations against leftist groups, labor unions, and civil rights organizations, suspecting them of communist influence. In 1956, frustrated by Supreme Court rulings limiting prosecutions of people based on political beliefs, especially communism, Hoover initiated a covert dirty tricks program known as COINTELPRO. His goal was to undermine groups he saw as threats, from the Communist Party USA to civil rights and left-wing organizations. COINTELPRO used various tactics, including infiltration, illegal wiretaps, spreading false rumors, and even forging documents. Hoover even monitored Hollywood stars like Charlie Chaplin, whom he saw as promoting communist ideas. COINTELPRO operated until 1971, when activists exposed it by stealing documents from an FBI office. A Senate committee later declared these activities illegal and unconstitutional. Hoover's influence was rooted in the secret files he collected on many public figures, enabling him to control or intimidate them. He went as far as targeting civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and John Lennon, with tactics meant to disrupt their influence. Hoover even attempted to blackmail King into suicide, though evidence suggests he aimed to pressure King to step down from leadership. Hoover also clashed with prominent civil rights figures like T.R.M. Howard, whom he publicly criticized for questioning the FBI's investigation of racial murders. His surveillance extended to groups like the Nation of Islam and the Black Panther Party, as well as individuals like Muhammad Ali and actress Jean Seberg, further cementing his reputation as a powerful yet controversial figure. Hoover believed these groups, particularly civil rights movements, threatened the social order. In his mind, anything that could destabilize the status quo was a potential danger, whether it was a communist threat or a call for racial equality. Hoover's impact went far beyond his job as FBI director. He had a lot of control over U.S. presidents, using his position to keep his own power strong. Serving under 8 presidents, from Calvin Coolidge to Richard Nixon, Hoover became someone they all had to deal with, even though none could truly control him. By gathering secret files on politicians and public figures, he created a sense of fear in Washington. Presidents who thought about firing him knew Hoover could easily reveal their personal secrets, making it risky to go against him. One clear example of Hoover's power was his close connection with President Franklin D. Roosevelt. During World War II, as worries about security inside the country grew, Roosevelt gave Hoover a lot of freedom to handle domestic threats. Hoover took this chance to grow the FBI's surveillance and intelligence activities, setting up widespread monitoring of people he saw as a risk to national security, like suspected communist supporters. Roosevelt's support gave Hoover both respect and the ability to build a surveillance network that would only grow stronger in the years to come. As new presidents came into office, Hoover's power only grew. Both Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower saw Hoover as a strong figure whose tough stance against communism was too valuable and maybe too intimidating to ignore. Hoover's control over information and his image as a symbol of stability against communist threats made it politically risky to challenge him. By the time John F. Kennedy became president, Hoover's hold on his position was even stronger. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, often clashed with Hoover over his methods and priorities, especially regarding civil rights. However, Hoover's alliances and the sensitive information he had collected made it almost impossible to remove him. Despite the Kennedys' attempts to limit his power, Hoover's job stayed safe. Under President Lyndon B. Johnson, Hoover's influence reached its height. Hoover and Johnson shared a complicated relationship that blended friendship with political maneuvering. Hoover's large collection of files on important people, from government officials to famous figures, let him apply quiet pressure. And Johnson valued Hoover's advice on handling security threats within the country. Hoover's grip on politics was so strong that he could often shape Johnson's decisions by presenting issues as potential security risks. When Richard Nixon became president, Hoover found someone who appreciated his hardline stance against subversive elements, which matched Nixon's views on rooting out domestic threats. However, Hoover's influence began to fade as the 1960s came to an end, mainly due to the changing public opinion about government surveillance and growing criticism of Hoover's tactics, especially during the Vietnam War protests and the Civil Rights Movement. Hoover's unchecked power left a profound and controversial legacy. His achievements in modernizing law enforcement and establishing the FBI as a premier investigative agency cannot be dismissed. He championed forensic science, created a national fingerprint database, and established rigorous standards for federal agents. The FBI became a force capable of addressing complex national security threats, and much of this success can be attributed to Hoover's leadership. However, Hoover's legacy is marred by his obsession with surveillance and control. His crusade against communism, although popular during the Cold War, devolved into a violation of civil liberties on an unprecedented scale. COINTELPRO, which was once a secret, eventually became a notorious example of government overreach and abuse of power. Hoover's willingness to intimidate, blackmail, and ruin lives in pursuit of his ideals led many to question his commitment to democratic principles. The extent of Hoover's influence raises troubling questions about the potential dangers of unchecked power. His tenure demonstrated how easily institutions meant to protect can be used to control and manipulate. In his pursuit of an orderly society, Hoover turned the FBI into a personal instrument of influence, protecting his power by any means necessary. Even after his death in 1972, the effects of his decisions continued to reverberate, especially as subsequent investigations revealed the full extent of his surveillance programs.